When I think about childhood, I don't remember anything feeling dangerous. It was the one time in life where everything seemed predictable. The same streets, the same houses, the same faces every day, and the people you spent the most time with. Your friends? They felt safe by default. You didn't question them. You didn't think you had to. Most of my memories are simple. Sleepovers that lasted too late, whispering about things that didn't really matter, sharing snacks, laughing over nothing. There was this unspoken trust, like whatever happened, you were on the same side. Looking back, that's probably what made everything feel so normal, even when it wasn't. Because the truth is, some of those moments don't sit right with me anymore. There were things I noticed back then that I didn't understand. Small behaviors, little habits. The kind you ignore because you don't have a reason not to. But now, years later, they feel different. Like I missed something obvious. And the worst part is, some of the people I trusted the most were the ones I should have been paying attention to. Story 1. The sleepover friend who never slept. I had a friend growing up named Saad. We met in primary school. And for a while, he was the one I spent the most time with. Wasn't loud or funny like some of the other kids, but he was easy to be around. Quiet mostly. The kind of person who would just sit next to you and not feel the need to fill every second with noise. He started coming over to my house pretty often. At first it was just after school, then weekends, and eventually sleepovers became a regular thing. My parents liked him. He was polite, never caused any trouble, always said thank you when my mom brought us food. There wasn't really anything about him that stood out as strange. Looking back, that's probably why it took me so long to notice anything at all. The first time I realized something felt off was during one of those sleepovers. We had stayed up late watching TV, nothing unusual, and eventually I fell asleep without really thinking about it. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. I don't even remember why. It was just one of those random moments where your eyes open and you're suddenly aware of the room. At first, everything seemed normal. The TV was off, the lights were out, and the room was quiet. But then I noticed Saad. He was sitting up, not just awake, but fully upright, his back straight, facing toward me. It took me a second to process it, because it didn't match what I expected to see. I thought maybe he had just woken up too, so I asked him if he was okay. He didn't answer right away, just kept sitting there. And after a few seconds he said, "Yeah, I just woke up." His voice sounded normal, maybe a little flat, but nothing I could point to. I remember feeling slightly uncomfortable, but I didn't think much of it. People wake up in the night. It happens. Just rolled over and went back to sleep. But it didn't stop there. The next few times he stayed over, the same thing happened. I'd wake up randomly and he'd already be awake, sitting in the same position, facing me. Sometimes I'd catch him looking directly at me, and other times it felt like he was just staring past me like I wasn't even there. I didn't know how to react to it. It wasn't scary exactly. Not yet, just strange. And the thing about strange things is, when you're a kid, you don't always question them the way you should. Just assume there's a normal explanation somewhere. At one point, I even joked about it the next day. I asked him why he kept waking up in the middle of the night. He shrugged and said he just had trouble sleeping sometimes. That answer should have been enough, but something about the way he said it didn't really sit right, and it started getting a little harder to ignore. One night I woke up again, but this time he wasn't on the mattress next to mine. For a second, I thought he might have gone to the bathroom. But then I heard something in the hallway. Soft footsteps. Slow. Like he was trying not to make noise. I got up and opened my door just a little. The hallway light was off, but I could see his silhouette moving toward the living room. I asked him what he was doing. He turned his head slightly, like he hadn't expected me to be awake. "Just bored," he said. That was it. No explanation. No hesitation. At the time, it didn't feel like enough to make a big deal out of. I just told him to come back to the room and went back to bed. He followed a few seconds later, lay down, and didn't say anything else. The next morning, everything felt normal again. I mentioned it once to my mom, just casually, like it wasn't important. She laughed it off and said some kids just have weird sleep habits. That was enough for me to drop it. If she wasn't worried, why should I be? But after that, I started noticing smaller things. Like how he always seemed fully awake the moment I opened my eyes, no matter what time it was. Or how sometimes, when I pretended to still be asleep, I could feel his attention on me. Not moving, not doing anything obvious, just there, watching. I didn't tell anyone about that part. It felt too vague to explain. It's like I'd sound stupid saying it out loud. Then one night, I decided not to react when I woke up. Kept my eyes closed, slowed my breathing, and just listened. For a while, nothing happened. The room was quiet. I almost convinced myself I had imagined everything. Then I heard movement. It's very slow, careful. I could feel him getting up, step by step, the mattress shifting slightly as his weight moved away. The floor creaked just a little as he stepped closer. Closer than before. I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. And then I felt it. That same presence, but closer now, right next to me. There was a pause, like he was just standing there. And then, very quietly, I heard him whisper something. I couldn't make out the words. Not because they were too soft, but because they didn't sound like normal whispering. It was almost like he was speaking under his breath, in a way that didn't fully form into words. I stayed completely still. I don't even think I was breathing properly at that point. After a few seconds, the whispering stopped. I heard him step back slowly, and then the mattress shifted again as he lay down. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. After that, I started avoiding sleepovers. I made excuses, told him I had plans, or that my parents said no. I didn't know how to explain what I felt, even to myself. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was something closer to fear, but without a clear reason. And then, without anything really happening, he just stopped coming over. We still saw each other at school for a while, but it wasn't the same. We didn't talk as much. Eventually, we just drifted apart. I never asked him about those nights. I never told anyone exactly what happened. But even now, years later, I still think about it sometimes. Not just what he was doing, but why he was doing it. And I've noticed something since then. I don't sleep well when someone else is in the room, even if I trust them, even if I know they're not like him. There's always a part of me that wonders what I'd see if I woke up at the wrong time. Story 2, the friend who knew too much after sod. I didn't really think I'd feel that kind of unease around someone again. But a couple of years later, there was another friend. His name was Bilal, and at first, he was the complete opposite. He was talkative, sharp, and extremely observant. The kind of person who noticed everything. If you got a haircut, he'd mention it immediately.
Yes.
If you changed something small, like your bag or your routine, he'd pick up on it without hesitation. At the time, it just felt like he paid attention more than most people. We became close pretty quickly. Same classes, same breaks, always sitting together. He was easy to talk to, and for a while, nothing about him felt strange. If anything, he just seemed more aware than everyone else. But then there were moments that didn't quite fit. It started small. He'd mention things about me that I didn't remember telling him. Like one day he casually brought up an argument I had with my older brother the night before. It wasn't anything loud or dramatic, just a normal disagreement at home. Asked him how he knew, and he just shrugged like it wasn't a big deal. It's just a guess, he said. I remember laughing it off, but something about it stuck with me. It didn't feel like a guess. It was too specific. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe I had mentioned it without realizing, but then it happened again and again. He'd casually bring up things about my life that I hadn't shared. Not just general stuff, but details. Small things that didn't leave the house. The kind of things you don't even think about telling anyone. Looking back, that was probably the first real sign. I didn't confront him about it directly. Instead, I started paying more attention, watching what I said around him, testing small things in my head. But no matter what I did, he always seemed one step ahead. Then it started getting worse. He began predicting things. Not in an obvious way, not like saying something dramatic was going to happen. It was always subtle. Like he'd mention that I'd forget my homework the next day, and then I would. Or he'd say, I'd be late to school, even when I had no reason to be, and somehow it would happen. Each time, it felt like a coincidence. But after a while, it stopped feeling random. It felt planned. I started getting this constant sense that I was being watched. Not in a physical way like someone was outside my window, but something deeper. Like my patterns, my habits, everything about my day was somehow visible to him. At home, I'd catch myself thinking about it more than I wanted to. I'd hesitate before doing small things, wondering if he'd bring them up later. Didn't make sense, but it didn't go away either. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone, actually. It felt too strange to explain. like I'd sound paranoid. Then one day everything changed. We were sitting together during lunch, just talking like usual, nothing serious. And out of nowhere, he mentioned something that made my stomach drop. He brought up something that had happened inside my house. Not just something general, but a very specific moment. A private conversation I had with my mom in the kitchen late at night when no one else was around. It wasn't loud. It wasn't something anyone could have overheard. I had never told anyone about it. Not him. Not anyone. I thought maybe I had misheard him. I asked him what he meant, trying to keep my voice normal. He just looked at me and repeated it. Exactly the same words. The same situation. I felt this sudden rush of confusion followed by something much worse. Fear. Not the kind you feel when something jumps out at you. The kind that settles in slowly, like you've just realized something is very wrong. I asked him how he knew that. He didn't answer right away. Just smiled a little, like it wasn't important. Like I said, he shrugged. I just noticed things. That was it. No explanation. No hesitation. After that, I couldn't see him the same way. Every conversation felt off. Every time he looked at me, it felt like he knew more than he should. More than anyone should. I started avoiding him, sitting somewhere else, leaving early, making excuses. He didn't react much at first, but I could tell he noticed. Of course he did. Eventually, we just stopped talking altogether. There wasn't a fight, no clear ending, just distance. But even after that, the feeling didn't go away. For a long time, I kept thinking about how he knew those things. I tried to come up with logical explanations, but nothing really fit. There was no way for him to know what happened inside my house that night. Even now, sometimes I still catch myself thinking about it. Not about him specifically, but about the idea that someone, somewhere, might still be paying attention. Not watching directly, but understanding patterns. And that's what bothers me the most. Because once you start noticing your own patterns, it becomes hard to believe no one else is. Story 3. The neighbor who took games too far. There was a boy in our neighborhood named Hamza who was a little older than the rest of us. And when you're a kid, even 2 years can make someone feel important. He wasn't an adult, but he was old enough to lead. He decided what we played, where we went, and which dares counted as proof that you weren't scared. Most of us followed along without questioning it. At first, everything felt normal. We were outside almost every evening, especially in summer, when the streets stayed warm after sunset and nobody wanted to go home. We played football, rode bikes, chased each other through empty plots, and explored places we probably shouldn't have. Unfinished houses, half-open gates, back alleys between walls. Hamza always had ideas. If we got bored, he changed the game. If someone complained, he made it sound better. That was what made him fun to be around in the beginning. Then the games started changing. He still called them games, but they were built more around fear than fun. Hide and seek after dark. Dares in places that felt too tight or too quiet. He liked spots where the light barely reached, where you couldn't see who was near you, where you had to sit alone and wait. At that age, fear made things feel exciting, so most of us went along with it. Looking back, that was the first real warning. He wasn't just making things interesting. He was making them uncomfortable on purpose. The dares became more specific. Stay in the shed for 5 minutes without speaking. Crawl under a broken gate and wait there alone. Hide in a place so cramped you couldn't get out quickly. Whenever someone hesitated, Hamza would smile and say, "It's just a game." That was how he explained everything. It's just a game. You're overreacting. Stop acting like a baby. What bothered me most was how closely he watched people. He didn't get loud or wild, just paid attention. He noticed when someone's breathing changed, when their voice got shaky, when they started looking for a way out. And once he saw that fear, he pushed a little more. There were moments that should have made all of us stop. Once, he shut a younger kid inside a room in an unfinished house and held the door for a few seconds while the kid cried. When he opened it, he laughed like it had been harmless. Another time, he made 2 of us hide in separate places and waited so long to come find us that both of us came out angry and shaken. The day that changed everything started quietly. There were only 4 of us outside. Hamza said he had a better version of hide and seek and wanted to use the storage box behind a vacant house at the end of the lane. It was a small concrete space with a rusted metal door. I remember not liking it as soon as I saw it. He told me to hide in there first. I said I'd pick somewhere else, but he kept pushing, saying nobody would ever check there. The others were watching, and I didn't want to look weak, so I stepped inside. It was smaller than I expected. The air smelled stale, and there was barely enough space to crouch. I turned to come back out. Then the door slammed shut. At first I thought he was joking. Then I heard metal scrape outside like he had dragged something in front of it. I pushed the door. It didn't move. I called his name once, then louder. I could hear voices outside, but nobody answered properly. The darkness inside felt different the second I realized I wasn't getting out on my own. The air seemed hotter, thinner. I started banging on the door and telling him to stop. My voice kept changing as I spoke, getting sharper and less controlled. Panic rose in my chest so fast it embarrassed me. That was when I understood it wasn't a game anymore. Maybe it never had been. He was enjoying the part where I was afraid. I don't know how long I was in there. Maybe a minute. Maybe 2. It felt much longer. My breathing got so loud it was all I could hear. Then the metal scraped again. The door opened. Light hit my eyes, and Hamza was standing there smiling in this calm, casual way, like nothing serious had happened. He said, "Relax. It was only for a second." I pushed past him and got out. My legs felt weak, and I hated that he could probably see it. The others looked uncomfortable too. Nobody laughed. After that, the group started drifting away from him without ever really saying why. People stopped showing up when he called for us. We found reasons to stay home or play somewhere else. No adult ever really knew what went on. To them, it probably looked like normal childhood distance. But it wasn't. Even now, I struggle with tight spaces. Small storerooms, locked bathrooms, elevators that stop too long. Nothing has to happen. My chest just tightens on its own. And every time it does, I think of that metal door closing, out of Hamza standing outside it, acting like fear was something harmless he had the right to control. Story 4. The girl who collected things. There was a girl I used to know named Ariba. We weren't as close as some of my other friends, but she was around a lot. She lived a few houses down, and our families knew each other well enough that it felt normal for her to come over, especially during weekends or school breaks. She was quiet in a way that didn't feel awkward. More like she was always focused on something, drawing mostly. She carried around a small notebook everywhere, and whenever things got quiet, she'd start sketching whatever was in front of her. People, objects, random corners of a room. She was good at it too, in a way that made you stop and look twice. She also liked collecting things. At first, it was completely harmless. Small objects that most people wouldn't think about. Buttons, old coins, bits of colored paper, wrappers from snacks we'd eaten. She kept them organized in little boxes, sorted in ways that only made sense to her. When she showed them to me, she seemed proud of how neatly everything was arranged. I didn't think much of it. Everyone has small habits like that. Looking back, that's probably how it started. Over time, the things she collected began to change. Not suddenly, just gradually. Instead of random objects, she started keeping things that felt more personal. A pen someone used. A bracelet left behind. Hair ties, small accessories, things that clearly belonged to someone. I remember asking her about it once. She just smiled and said she liked keeping things that reminded her of people. At the time, that sounded almost normal, maybe a little unusual, but not enough to question. Then things started going missing. It wasn't obvious at first, just small things around the house that I assumed had been misplaced. A keychain I kept on my desk. A photo that used to be on a shelf. A watch I hadn't worn in a while. None of it felt important enough to search for seriously, so I ignored it. But the pattern kept repeating. The only common detail, the only thing that stayed consistent, was that Ariba had been over before each time something disappeared. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. It felt wrong to think that way about someone I knew, so I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation, that I was just being forgetful. Then one afternoon, I went to her house. It wasn't unusual. I had been there before. Her room was always neat, with her drawings pinned to the walls and her small collection boxes stacked carefully on a shelf. She wasn't in the room when I walked in. I think she had gone to get something from the kitchen. I wasn't planning to look through anything, but something caught my attention. One of the boxes was slightly open. I don't know why I noticed it or why I felt the need to check. Maybe because, by that point, I had already started connecting things in my head, even if I didn't want to admit it. I moved closer and lifted the lid. Inside, there were items I recognized immediately. My keychain, the photo that had gone missing, the watch. They were placed neatly, almost carefully, as if they were part of a display, not hidden, not thrown together. Arranged. For a second, I just stood there, trying to process it. My mind didn't go straight to anger. It was more confusion than anything else. Like I was looking at something that didn't make sense, even though it clearly did. I should have closed the box and walked away, but I didn't. I checked the others. Each one held more things. Some of them I didn't recognize, probably belonging to other people. Small objects that looked ordinary on their own, but together felt unintentional. Then I found something that made everything shift. It was something from my room, something I kept in a place nobody would casually see, let alone take. It wasn't valuable, but it was personal in a way that made it impossible to ignore. There was no way she had taken it by accident. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a strange habit. It felt deliberate. I put everything back exactly the way I found it, closed the lid, stepped away, and sat down like nothing had happened. When she came back into the room, she smiled like she always did, holding a glass of water, completely normal. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I didn't know how to explain what I had just seen without making it feel unreal, even to myself.
aisa.
I acted like everything was fine, stayed for a while longer, and then left. After that, I started keeping my distance. Made excuses when she came over. Kept my room closed. Stopped leaving things out, slowly. Without any confrontation, the friendship just faded. She never brought it up. Never acted differently. And that's what stayed with me the most. Not what she took, but how normal she seemed while doing it. Even now, I sometimes think about how long it had been happening before I noticed. How many things I never realized were missing, and how many of them might still be somewhere, sitting neatly in a box, exactly where she wanted them. Story 5. The friend who changed overnight. There was a guy in my class named Daniel. And for most of the year, he was one of the easiest people to be around. He had this kind of energy that filled whatever space he was in. Always talking, always joking, always pulling people into conversations, even if they didn't plan on being part of them. We weren't best friends, but we sat close enough in class and spent enough time together that it felt natural. He was the kind of person you didn't really question. Everything about him was consistent, and then, almost overnight, that changed. At first, it wasn't something you could point to clearly. He just got quieter, not completely silent, but the constant talking stopped. He'd sit in his seat, looking down at his desk, barely reacting to anything around him. When people tried to joke with him, he'd give short answers, or just nod. It didn't seem serious at the beginning. Everyone has off days. I remember thinking maybe something had happened at home, or he was just tired. But it didn't go back to normal. Days passed, and the shift stayed. If anything, it became more noticeable. He stopped making eye contact almost entirely. When teachers asked him questions, he'd answer in the shortest way possible, like he was trying to end the conversation before it even started. I asked him once if he was okay. He looked at me for a second like he was trying to decide how to respond and then just said, "Yeah, I'm fine." There was nothing in his voice, no frustration, no sadness, just flat. That was the first moment it felt off. After that, things started changing in smaller ways that were harder to explain. He'd lose track of conversations halfway through, like he forgot what was being said. Sometimes he'd respond to things that hadn't even been mentioned yet, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. And then there were the pauses. He'd just stop in the middle of whatever he was doing and stare, not at anything specific, just forward, unfocused, like he wasn't really present. At first, people joked about it, said he was daydreaming or thinking too much. But after a while, even that stopped feeling normal. Then the comments started. They weren't loud or dramatic. That's what made them worse. He'd say things quietly, almost casually, like they didn't carry any weight. Once, during lunch, someone accidentally knocked over his water bottle. It wasn't a big deal. It barely even spilled. But Daniel just looked at it for a few seconds and said, in this calm voice, if I wanted to, I could make sure that never happened again. We laughed at first because it sounded like a joke, but he didn't smile. He just sat there, looking at the table like he hadn't said anything unusual. Another time, a teacher scolded him for not paying attention. Nothing serious, just a normal warning. After class, while everyone was packing up, I heard him say under his breath, "People don't realize how easy it is to stop someone from talking." It wasn't loud enough for everyone to hear. It's just me. I remember turning to look at him, expecting some kind of reaction, but he was already staring straight ahead again, like the moment had passed. That was when the unease really set in. It wasn't just that he had changed. It was how controlled everything felt. Like whatever he was thinking, he wasn't sharing all of it. Only small pieces, just enough to make you notice. And then there were the moments when he laughed. Not often, but when he did, it never matched what was happening. Someone would say something normal, and he'd laugh a few seconds too late, or for a little too long. It wasn't loud, just slightly off. Like the timing didn't line up with anything around him. One day everything reached a point I couldn't ignore. We were sitting in class, waiting for the teacher to arrive. It was quiet, the kind of silence that happens when everyone is tired or distracted. Daniel was sitting next to me, looking down at his hands. Out of nowhere, he spoke. "If someone disappeared," he said, almost casually, "most people wouldn't even notice right away." I didn't respond. I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or just thinking out loud. He continued, still calm. It wouldn't take much to make it look normal. There was no emotion in his voice, no hesitation, just a statement. I felt this sudden tension in my chest, like something had shifted in the room, even though nothing had physically changed. I asked him what he meant. He turned his head slowly and looked at me. "For example," he said, "if someone knew your routine, where you go when you're alone, it wouldn't be difficult." He stopped there. No smile, no explanation, just silence. I didn't say anything after that. I couldn't. My mind was trying to catch up with what he had just said, but it didn't feel like a normal conversation anymore. It felt like something I wasn't supposed to hear. After that day, I started keeping my distance. I avoided sitting near him, stopped talking to him unless I had to. Other people seemed to notice something was off too, even if they didn't say it directly. Then, without much warning, he stopped coming to school. At first, we thought he was sick. A few days passed, then a week. Teachers didn't say much, just that he wouldn't be attending for a while. Eventually, even that stopped being mentioned. He was just gone. No explanation, no closure. I never found out what actually happened to him. Whether it was something at home, something medical, or something else entirely. Sometimes I still think about those conversations. Not just what he said, but how he said it. Calm, certain, like he wasn't imagining anything, just describing it. And that's the part that never really left me. Story 6. The one I trusted the most, strongest story out of everyone I knew growing up. The person I trusted most was a boy named Usman. We met so young that I can't remember a proper beginning. He was just always there. Our families knew each other. We lived close. And for years it felt like he belonged to every part of my routine. That kind of friendship makes you careless. You stop observing the person because they become part of what feels safe. Some of my earliest memories involve him beside me, sitting on a low wall after sunset, sharing snacks, whispering about school and family. When I picture childhood comfort, his face is in it. That's probably why I miss the smaller signs. Usman liked things his way, but he never made it obvious. He chose where we went, what we played, who we spent time with. If I suggested something else, he would laugh and say his idea was better, and I would usually go along with it. It just felt normal, because it was him. There were little moments that seemed different now. If I made plans with someone else, he went quiet. If I spent too much time with other friends at school, he would ask why I was acting strange. He always said it lightly, almost like a joke, but there was pressure underneath it. At the time, I told myself close friends were supposed to be a little possessive. As we got older, it became harder to dismiss. He didn't like sharing my attention. If I mentioned another friend, he immediately found something wrong with them. If I wanted to do something without him, he became cold for a while, then suddenly friendly again. He was good at making me feel guilty without directly accusing me of anything. Eventually, I started adjusting without thinking. Turning down invitations, leaving early, making choices based on whether Usman would be annoyed. I never called it pressure back then. I thought that was what closeness looked like. The moment that changed everything happened one summer afternoon. A few of us had gone to a canal area outside the neighborhood, the kind of place older kids liked because adults rarely came there. We weren't supposed to be there. The path was uneven, with cracked concrete, loose dirt, and a drop toward the water. I remember feeling uneasy before we even reached the edge, but Usman kept saying I worried too much. At one point, the others moved ahead, and it was just the two of us. I was standing near a narrow section, careful with my footing. He was beside me, talking normally. Then he moved slightly behind me. What happened next was small enough that I spent years trying to explain it away. I felt a push. Not hard, not dramatic. It's just enough pressure against the back of my shoulder to throw my balance forward. My foot slipped, my knee hit the ground, and one hand scraped across rough concrete as I caught myself. For 1 second, I was sure I was going over. I turned around immediately. Usman was standing there, watching me with an expression that bothers me. He didn't look scared. He didn't look shocked. It was more like he was waiting to see the result. Then he reached down and said, "Almost too quickly, you slipped." That was the moment something inside me changed, because I knew I hadn't slipped first. The push came before the fall. It had been slight, almost deniable, but real. And the worst part wasn't even the push itself. It was how easily he stepped into concern afterward. I didn't argue with him there. I got up, said I was fine, and walked back toward the others. My knee was bleeding, my palms stung, and my heart was beating hard enough that I could barely focus. Usman acted normal for the rest of the day. He joked with everyone and never once seemed nervous. For days, I kept replaying it in my head. Maybe it was an accident, maybe I remembered it wrong, but every explanation got weaker the more I thought about it. Deep down, I knew he had done something deliberate, then hidden behind how small it looked. After that, everything changed shape. All the little moments I had excused suddenly fit together. The guilt, the mood shifts, the isolation, the way he always guided things toward what he wanted. It no longer felt like closeness. It felt like possession. I started avoiding him, ignoring calls, taking different routes home, telling my family I was busy when he came by. He tried for a while, confused, irritated, then calm. But I never gave him another chance to get close. Eventually, it ended without any real confrontation. Years of friendship just stopped. I think that's what hurts most. Not only that he put me in danger, but that he did it after years of being the person I trusted most. He knew exactly how safe I felt with him. Out of everyone in these stories, he is the one I think about the most. Fear from strangers makes sense. Fear from someone you almost consider family is different. It changes old memories. The one person I trusted the most was the one I should have been most afraid of. When I look back at all of this now, it doesn't feel like separate memories anymore. It feels connected in a way I didn't understand at the time. Back then, each person was just part of my normal life. A friend, a classmate, someone I trusted without thinking too much about it. It's probably what makes it unsettling now, because none of them felt dangerous in the beginning. There wasn't a clear moment where something obvious changed. It was always small things. Behaviors that didn't quite fit, reactions that felt slightly off. The kind of details you notice for a second, then ignore because everything else feels normal. Looking back, those details were always there. Just didn't know what they meant. And I think that's the part that stays with me more than anything. People don't suddenly become something else overnight. Whatever they are, whatever they're capable of, it shows in small ways long before you recognize it. Just don't see it clearly when you're in the middle of it. At the time, everything felt harmless, familiar, safe. That's what makes it harder to process now. Because the scariest part isn't what actually happened. It's how normal it all felt while it was happening. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about those people, wondering where they are now or if they ever changed. But more than that, I think about how easily I trusted them. It makes me wonder something I can't really shake. If you've ever known someone like that, you might not have realized it either. And that thought stays longer than it should. Because once you start replaying those small moments, it becomes harder to ignore the feeling that something was always slightly wrong from the very beginning. And you didn't see it at all.